Atelier Larassati is a progressive architecture studio based in Indonesia that creates memorable structures, unique ideas, and responsible designs. The studio was started by Stephanie Larassati with the belief that architecture is not just about the form and the style, but rather about its emotional connection with the users and the environment, and also about its adaptability to the local context, social life, and the users. So, this way, she and her team have been able to create design strategies that are tailored to each project's needs, functions, and opportunities. Atelier Larassati is famous for building relevant temporary structures, such as the numerous open air cinemas in Indonesia, and most recently, the microtreatment facility for COVID 19 at a hospital in Jakarta. So, we thought it would be really great to chat with Stephanie about the place and the role temporary architecture plays in today's age, and about the impact they can have on the larger society. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Really appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, first and foremost, tell us a bit about your journey.
I studied architecture at the Technische Universität Berlin. After my graduation, I worked at a German architecture office, Atelier Architekten. There, I gained many experiences in designing healthcare, education, and office buildings, focusing on energy efficient buildings. And in between, I also work as a stage design assistant for several theater houses. In 2016, I decided to go back to Indonesia to create my own practice. And by the time I moved, I had just completed my first project in Jakarta, which was this massive architectural installation on the side of the cultural center of Taman Ismail Marzuki, aimed to raise awareness on human rights issues amongst young people. And the project was a collaboration between architects, NGO, and young artists. The structure was built in 3 days um, and lasted for 1 week and attracted up to 3,000 visitors. And it gained a lot of positive exposures and sparked a lot of necessary discussions around the topic. And at that time, I saw the opportunity and also the power of this kind of installations, especially in Indonesia, where there are so many things or so many issues in the society that are rarely spoken about in the public. And this project eventually led me to my first commission project, which was to design a temporary outdoor cinema or an open air cinema above the sea in a village in Kayong, West Borneo, which then later became a yearly program by the government. After that, we designed two other open air cinema, one in Sabang, Aceh, and the other, or the last one, the recent one, is in Kupang, Nusa Tenggara Timur.
Yeah, that whole series of project really looks interesting and one of a kind. So, how did you find specific passion in temporary structures?
Well, in my office or myself, I'm very interested in asking the questions of um, how relevant it is actually to aim for permanence when changes are inevitable in almost every aspect of our lives. And the question is it possible to create something that is not permanent or ephemeral, yet sustainable? And how can architecture be an agent of change? I think having lived in Berlin for almost 11 years has influenced me a lot. It has opened my perspectives in seeing the potentials of temporality. Berlin was a city in transition, always in constant battle between old and new, and heavily rooted in its own history and but at the same time, highly creative and highly experimental. And I have witnessed how the city was built based on interventions, temporality, and experimentations. And I learned about this term Zwischennutzung very early in my study, which basically means temporary use. It is considered as a formal urban development strategy where usually young creatives, occupy vacant properties in the city and inject these properties with new and attractive activities for a certain time period. And these temporary uses lasted for a few years, but were able to give a lasting positive impact to the city development. And sometimes the projects or the temporary uses were so successful that the citizens and users were driving its further development. And it went beyond the merely temporary use of buildings. And this kind of approach was really fascinating to me and kind of influenced me in seeing the potential of temporality.
Mm. No, I do agree because this approach kind of treats buildings as if they have a life on their own, and they are living in coexistence with whatever it is happening in the world, right? That they have to keep up with the changes and the pace as well. So, what is it that you see so powerful in temporary structures?
Well, when talk about temporary, we talk about time, right? And the idea of time is obviously very important. And why are we working with temporary projects is that it allows us to very quickly respond to new ideas that we are curious about, or to certain conditions that need to be taken actions about. And architecture is a slow process. And the nice thing about temporary architecture is that you can be very quickly in a dialogue with the contemporary world. And
Right.
secondly, an ephemeral architecture is designed to exist for a short period of time and then disappear. And this fleeting experience leaves behind a memory. And therefore, the experience will be unique and more meaningful, and precisely because of its acknowledged time limit. And the tectonic of the buildings will be telling of its mutable nature as a dynamic marker of place and time. And this showcases the potential sustainable value in impermanence.
Mm. Then, building this way are often associated with building fast and reactively to the current conditions and needs, right? So it is in a way more effective and more quote unquote sustainable because you're not gonna put in the wrong function if you are responding to what is needed at a time, right? Um, Compared to building now to anticipate a need later in the future. So maybe you can give us an example through your experience how building reactively as opposed to proactively have kind of benefited you in a way.
Yeah, I think temporary architecture can be both. It can be reactive, and it can also be proactive. Reactive by responding quickly to the current conditions, proactive by being a facilitator for new possibilities and challenging ideas for the future of architecture. And since ancient times, architects have been concerned with issues of permanence and monumentality. Always seek to create and preserve meaning in buildings and the rituals surrounding them. And I think that sustainability is our generation's iteration of permanence. And however, the reality is we live in a world with rapid technology advancement that have transformed our culture into a very fast-paced society of trends and immediacy. And we tend to dispose anything that is not relevant anymore, or when there's new technology, we tend to demolish or dispose anything that are not relevant to that new technology. And here, I think ephemeral has a role in which it can become, or it becomes a mediator between this aspired permanence and inevitable change. Our recently completed project was a hospital extension in Jakarta for St. Carol's Hospital in response to the current pandemic. It is part of an initiative called Micro Treatment Facility, which aim to accommodate additional treatment capacity to support hospitals and communities by creating screening and medical facilities that are quick to construct, scalable, flexible in its sizes, and adaptable in various locations. The structure is 140 square meter, and it comprises a wide scaffolding structure, bankirai wood flooring, and polycarbonate cladding. And it was prefabricated in only 2 weeks and built on site in 4 days. And the whole thing are completely, entirely built with scaffolding. And scaffolding is actually a very common construction element. It is usually used to prepare a construction. It is the very first thing that you build on site, right? And the construction technology is very simple and can be done by basically anyone. And due to its simple construction and easy assembling, it has the ability to facilitate very quick structures that are required in emergency cases. And the material is also reusable and can be adjusted for other purposes in the future. And in the office, we are always very fascinated about this structure, about scaffolding, because of its adaptability and flexibility. And we are working constantly to explore the possibility of this material and of this construction technology, and how these materials can be combined with other materials to result in other tectonics or other exciting form and building elements.
Yeah, I think this project alone is a great and successful example of reacting quickly to the current condition and also the scale of the impact. In such a compact process, you are able to generate this huge impact. So, often, this quick make and break nature of temporary structures can also be used as a tool to start conversations that are relevant to address socially and culturally, right? How so?
Well, in our practice, we frequently raise this question on the present and future use of temporary architecture. And actually, temporary architecture has also always been around since ancient times, right? Like, for example, the wooden huts, circuses, the medieval stages, world fairs, to the Bauhaus post-war prefabs, and disaster relief. And in contemporary architecture, we are more familiar with temporary exhibitions or pavilions, such as the Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion, for example, or Alison and Peter Smithson's House of the Future for the Daily Mail Ideal Home exhibition in London. Those were two very famous examples. Um, these are prototypes for modern living that showcase provocative ideas on the future of architecture and urbanism. And they are still, until now, very provocative and still triggering dialogues. And these structures, situations, and events quickly appear and disappear, but they are designed to invest and embed themselves in a community, in a public space, or in a setup of ideas. And because they have the ability to open up possibilities, they have the ability to test scenarios and subvert preconceptions of what our cities and society should and could be like. And I also see that temporary architecture is not only an object, but it is actually a situation. In some structures or in some conditions, temporary architecture becomes a platform for an event. And therefore, it becomes a platform for a relationship to happen, right? Then it has also a form to it, which was very recognizable. And it became the symbol of the event, which which is also what architecture can do very well. and it solidifies and gives importance to things that are often forgotten or invisible, and it makes those things tangible and visible and memorable. In that way, temporary architecture can have a lasting impact or a sustainable value.
Like the case of the treatment facility.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the nice or appealing part of temporary architecture that it is often more budget friendly and requires lesser permit, and that is what I experienced also in my projects. Well, the process was more relaxed and less complicated in comparison to normal like permanent buildings, and in that way it some structures have the ability to involve the users either in the construction process or even in the design process, or in the end result, which creates a deeper relationship between the architecture, the users, and the function itself. And I think when this interconnection happens between the user, the architecture, and the function, people can understand in a tangible way the way that things could transform over time, and that temporary can also have permanent impact.
And you and the team, also as the architect, I'm sure, are more intact with the whole process from planning to designing, constructing, and also maintaining it as well, right?
Yeah,
So it's great that in this one compact process, you get a bit of architecture and then you get a bit of engineering and also management,
yeah.
right? So, lastly, changing the normal way of thinking or perceiving the way we build is crucial because it's not like we say now that we want to build more sustainably and it'll happen overnight, right? We need to change from the fundamental thing that is our way of thinking. So, in your opinion, how should architecture be perceived moving forward?
I would like to quote Jing Liu from Zoil. She said that all architecture is temporary. It should remain and it would always remain open-ended. Um, in our society, we usually are interested in seeking finality and permanence. But I think we ought to understand architecture as not an end of things, but just as a momentary coming together of ideas, materials, and craftsmanships. And I think this way of thinking could result in new possibilities in understanding and creating architecture. And sometimes, we forgot to whom it is we are actually building and testing the ground. I think we need to be more aware of the message and the agency of those aesthetics that we build, that we create. In fact, we're not talking merely about temporary architecture. It is more about how architects can push the agenda and take some risks, and what that can afford us as a society and also as a profession in architecture.
Cool. I think this whole conversation is really eye-opening and it doesn't only raise our awareness of the power of temporary structures, but also it makes us think about ever needing a permanent building, especially if the functions keep on changing. Well, so do you think will there ever be a world that only consists of temporary structures?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. Well, sustainability is a very hot topic right now, right? And we are in a constant effort to build sustainably. And sustainability often is connected with permanence, with something that is always there for future generations. But if you think about the changes in society caused by technology and many other things, for example, this pandemic, when the changes are constant, the only thing constant in the world are changes. How can we build according to that? That is always the questions for me. For example, when we see in the city build like sports stadiums, for example, or big volumes structures. After the events ended, what happens to the stadium? What happens to the spaces that are taken away in that area? So maybe we can build a temporary sports stadium. So after the events ended, the stadium has also disappeared. So the sites are back to its normal condition, and it's back for the people that lives around that area, for example.
Yeah, honestly, that would be a great challenge also for us, especially in this time of adaptation and adaptive architecture. It means that we as a person also need to be adapting our way of thinking as well. So, thank you so much, Stephanie, for the insight. We really, really learned a lot, and we wish you the best in everything that you do and keep in touch.
You're welcome. Thank you.